Hey guys, so while you're listening to this, I will be on a plane. Yes, I'm heading on another trip, but this time overseas. I am heading to Budapest, Hungary. I am very excited to go to the beautiful nation. I've never been there before, of Hungary, and see the Danube, and I'm going to be speaking there. And this will play into this podcast today because we have Dr. Jeffrey Addicott on with us. He's a good friend of mine. Who I have known since I was working at the Washington Times. He's a former JAG officer for the military, U.S. Special Forces. He is very familiar with military law, foreign policy. And I brought him on this show not only to talk about his new book, which I'm really excited about because it's such an uncomfortable truth. It deals with Union terror, actually with the Union Army, and kind of the debunking of the false justifications for Union terror against Southern civilians in the American Civil War. So he's telling another side of the Civil War saga, which is not always comfortable to hear. I mean, there were atrocities committed on both sides. And I think, just setting the record straight is important. But we're also going to talk about the very uncomfortable truths that we're facing right now. And I'm going to Hungary. It's a conservative nation. The people of Hungary understand very well what life was like living under the Iron Curtain, under the former Soviet Union, under that regime, and what it was like to be controlled by a regime that was ruthless, and why they never wanted to end up there again, and why President Viktor Orban is very adamant about that. And yes, we might not always agree with our allies, but I think that Hungary is a true ally of the United States. And the Biden administration obviously does not feel that exact same way about Hungary. It's really interesting because Samantha Power was there actually I remember she was working for the Obama administration, but Samantha Power was there last month, and she was basically pushing this socially conservative country. Miranda Devine wrote about this with the New York Post, but she was trying to stir up trouble about intersex activists. Like, why is Hungary, banning gender studies in their schools and the portrayal of LGBTQ to content to minors? Well, guess what? A lot of Americans don't want this either. Our children have the right to be children. We don't need Samantha Power running around, Hungary trying to push her agenda on them. And as well as we've seen the same issue with Uganda and, pushing the LGBTQ movement in Uganda, a Christian nation that has suffered a lot. Let people run their own countries. It's not like they're doing anything we need to condemn right now. We're just this administration is trying to push its ideological woke agenda on the whole world. And we know this because Admiral Kirby mentioned this. Remember that? Our National Security Council spokesman, Admiral John Kirby, I used to work with him when he was at the Pentagon. He said LGBTQ rights are a core part of our foreign policy. Although I am totally supportive of our fellow man, I'm not trying to say an adult doesn't have the right to love somebody that they want to love, that make their own decisions. I do not want my children, being forced with this new woke agenda we see in our schools and stuff. And neither do a lot of other countries, by the way. The same thing was happening in Guatemala. It still is. We have State Department people pushing that. I'm going to ask Dr. Jeffrey Addicott about this based on his own assessment of what's going on in the military, because right now, woke military is a big problem, because obviously we're not just pushing it on our foreign nations or foreign allies. We're pushing the same woke agenda on our military, and it is creating enormous trouble, enormous problems. And we're going to talk to him about that. We're going to talk to him about Gary Brugman, my good friend who was pardoned by President Trump because of Jeffrey Addicott's great fight for him. We're going to talk about Ukraine and the leaked Pentagon documents. My gosh, we have so much to talk about. And we're going to talk about those uncomfortable truths. Yes, uncomfortable truths that Jeffrey Addicott has written about in his book about Union terror against Southern civilians, also including Black Southern civilians during the time of the Civil War. And that's something that I'm really interested in hearing about. I love history and I love reading about it, which is very, very important to us. But first, I want to tell you about MyPillow, right? When we think of patriots in this country, Mike Lindell comes to mind. He's not afraid to speak his piece. He's not afraid to stand up for what he believes in. And that is the American way. And right now, he has a buy one, get one free on MyPillow 2.0. Yes, buy one, get one free on MyPillow 2.0. All you have to do is use code Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R. That's C-A-R-T-E-R, MyPillow 2.0. You'll get brand new temperature regulating technology that will keep you comfortable throughout the night. I promise you that. When you get these pillows and you feel them, they are cool to the touch, no matter when you use them. It could be the next day, a week later, they always feel cool. And for a limited time right now, when you buy one, you'll get one MyPillow 2.0 free. Think about that with the promo code Carter. Go to mypillow.com for MyPillow 2.0, buy one, get one pricing, plus discounts on your favorite MyPillow products like towels, sheets, slippers, and more by simply using code Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R. Stay cool and sleep better with the MyPillow 2.0. Buy one, get one free sale going on now at mypillow.com. Promo code Carter. mypillow.com, promo code Carter. I've got my good friend, Dr. Jeffrey Addicott on. He is not only my friend, but he's a professor of law at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. I live now practically down the street from there. He is a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. Gosh, Jeff, you do so much. Where he served as a JAG officer for the U.S. Army Special Forces, like my husband, a Special Forces operator. He is the founder and director of the Warrior Defense Project. I love this whole organization because I've written so many stories and worked with Jeff on so many stories that I believe have really saved the lives and reputation and future of upstanding military personnel, and just all the great work that you've done, Jeff. And you're also the author of Union Terror, debunking the false justifications for Union terror against Southern civilians in the American Civil War. You're always pushing for truth, Jeff, no matter what, right?
Well, that's it. Objective reality and truth are something that is in short supply these days, particularly in our media and many times in our government.
I absolutely agree with you. And, I spend a lot of time talking to folks about that. In fact, earlier today, I was talking to Sean Hannity on the radio show. And for some of you, it might be a day or two after this, but I was on with Tom Homan and Mark Morgan. Everybody knows them. Mark Morgan and Tom Homan were both Department of Homeland Security and with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And one of the issues that we were talking about was just that, objective reality, right? What is really going on at the border? We're watching it happen every single day. And then you have people like Alejandro Mayorkas, and I know this isn't exactly your subject line, Jeff, but you live here in the great state of Texas. And, you have people like Alejandro Mayorkas saying there isn't a problem at the border. Meanwhile, in Brownsville, this past week, it has surged to 15,000 people in just Brownsville alone. And they can't even find a place to hold them. They're just releasing people into the United States. Is this a pattern of behavior that you're seeing in this administration more than you've seen in past administrations? Or can we say, no, we've seen this across the board for decades? I don't know.
I'm always, when a politician tells you that we're going to be the most transparent administration in the history of America, hold on to your wallets, because generally when people have to tell you they're honest, that's a good sign that they're not honest. And that's what the Biden administration said. We're going to be the most transparent, open administration. They're the most closed administration we've ever had in terms of access to information, access to real questions from journalists like yourselves. And so basically what most people do, and myself included, is we hear something that the administration puts out, we assume the opposite, and you'll actually be closer to the truth about 90% of the time.
That's exactly true. I think this is such an important point, especially with the Biden administration. It's like they are constantly gaslighting the American public. One of the big issues, and I'm going to jump right into this with you, is woke in the military. And the reason I bring that up, people are talking to me about it on the backside, how imperative it is that we get out of these, like they're trying to culturalize the military in this new woke idealism, which a lot of people believe is going to destroy our ability in our military to defend itself. Is that something that you agree with, or what are you thinking?
Well, look at the facts. I mean, yes, I agree with it, but it's fact-based. I mean, the military for the last 2 years, they can't meet not even close to what the goals are they need to bring in new soldiers, because it's a volunteer force. And many of the soldiers that come from traditional families with traditional family values, God and country, they look at the military and they say, well, the military rejects those values. In fact, I'll be persecuted if I embrace those traditional American values. So why would I join? And so we're missing the recruitment goals, and that's the people that do all the fighting. So people that, sip lattes at Starbucks and worry about wokeness, they're generally not warriors. They're not going to be out there in the front risking their lives for anything. They join because they're looking for some type of a financial benefit, schooling, medical stuff. They're not joining because they love their country and they're willing to give their lives for their country. So the people that you need to fight, you're driving them out, and that's not going to end well.
One of my, I was very, very lucky to meet over a week ago. It was Miranda Devine. She's the author of, Hunter Biden's Laptop from Hell. She's a great writer too and columnist for the New York Post. And she wrote this really incredible article on the White House's push for woke foreign policy. And she and I had a chance to talk about this and how it's going to backfire with our conservative allies overseas. I've already seen that happen in Guatemala. I've seen it happen across the board. And, you got John Kirby, who I have known for years, all of a sudden come out and say things like, LGBTQ rights are a core part of our foreign policy. And, I don't understand how we went from, we need to be able to fight two front wars, right? I mean, as part of our battle plan, we need to be able to do that, defend our homeland and fight somewhere else, to now LGBTQ rights are a core part of our foreign policy, and whether or not we'll assist you with aid or not. And we saw that with the sanctions on Christian Uganda. We've seen that with how they're treating people in Guatemala, and El Salvador is a big deal with President Bukele as well. It's absolutely stunning to me. And they're going after, Hungary. I'm going to be there soon. I'll be there all week in Budapest and trying to stir up trouble there. What is going on here?
Well, plus you forgot to mention that they selectively get outraged on these non-issues because Muslim countries that have a much worse record than Christian Uganda, they don't say a peep about them and how they treat their women or any other category. They just give them a big pass. So the hypocrisy.
And Iran, Jeff, they pushed them off buildings. They hung people. They hang people for being gay there. So yeah. So what's up with that? They gave them a $150 billion deal under Obama.
That's right. And they're still trying to close a deal, which of course is, if you're a student of history, this reminds me of the time right after World War I, when the intellectuals and the wokes back then, they didn't call themselves wokes, but they decided they're going to outlaw war. And that was the whole premise of the League of Nations. They just outlawed wars, and then they signed treaties where all the major powers agreed to cut their militaries in half, or by 60 or 70% their navy, their army, because their propaganda was that armies start wars, therefore we'll get rid of armies. In the meantime, the fascist Italians, the Nazi Germans, and the imperialistic Japanese, they signed the treaties, but they didn't keep their word. They just built up gigantic militaries, and we almost were destroyed. So the same type of nonsense. It's not that this generation has found something new. every generation has to fight this battle of people that just deny objective reality and traditional values and shake their fist at God and say, this should not be. I didn't make things this way, but I don't shake my fist at God. And they hate the very country they come from. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen in my generation. Pardon my language.
It really is. It really is. And the reason I bring all this up is because I feel like we're living in such uncertain times, and we see the threats from our adversaries, and they're more powerful now than we've ever seen before. And I know that you have always understood this on a historical level, but you've also fought for the individual rights of our service members. And I keep trying to remember, we have known each other for so long, and mostly because you reached out to me. I stumbled right onto you when it came to protecting our warriors with the Warrior Defense Project. You actually go out of your way to defend our troops against these unseemly actions taken against them by superior officers in the military, which, by the way, is a fight in and of itself, right?
It is. I think we first met well over a decade ago when you worked for the Washington Times. And
That's true.
And so, you've covered rules of engagement, fiasco stories that we've done. I had Green Berets charged with murder for shooting the enemy in combat, which we got them acquitted. But yeah, I've done over almost 200 cases, and we don't charge a dime. They don't have any money. These type of people go in the military, not for the money, but for God and country. And we don't charge a dime at the law school. We're the only law school in the country that does this. A, it's a lot of work, and B, there's no compensation for doing this stuff. And it's just, like you, you go above and beyond the call of duty, and it's just because we love our country. And our view is that, yes, we've got a lot of members in the American family. Some of them are like your own family. You don't want to put them in the closet, but I'm a very tolerant person. I tolerate whatever you want to do, people, but there are certain fundamental pillars that we cannot destroy, or we will not survive as a country. There won't be in the United States if we don't understand the basic principles, and that means capitalism. That means hard work. If you're at a meeting in the military and you're 5 minutes late, if you're on time, you're late. That type of attitude now is looked down on, that, we got to have everybody get an award. We can't have, some students doing better than others. That's just life. That's reality.
Right. And we treat our heroes sometimes as pariahs. Instead of heroes. And that, I always go back to thinking about Lieutenant Waddell and the case that we worked on, and Mark Waddell, and how those, and you wrote a great piece on it. In fact, I pulled it up. And I wrote lots of stories on Waddell. I met his family, but how overly restrictive rules of engagement adversely impacted the American warfighter and undermined our ability to win military victories. And Waddell was a perfect example of that. And I want you to explain a little bit about that. But I remember when I first heard about his case, I just couldn't believe it. I'd been on the battlefield a lot with our troops, and I saw how the rules of engagement. So for all of you out there who may not know what we're talking about, it is when we impose these restrictive rules on our warfighters, and they're really unable to defend themselves. And what happens is that out of fear of defending themselves, sometimes they become the injured ones or killed out on the battlefield. They can't, fight back if their forward operating base or combat outpost is in the middle of a town. I remember that happening often in Afghanistan, where the Taliban would fire upon our soldiers and they couldn't fire back. And it was unbelievable what our troops went through. Talk a little bit about Waddell and how that changed. You made quite a splash with that case.
It was. And this is not just, Democrats. It's Republican administration, Democrat administrations. As you correctly indicated, our soldiers are taught to abide by the law of war, which most people can figure out. Don't shoot the prisoners, don't target civilians, stuff like that. It's not hard to figure out what the law of war is. But then on top of that, we put these other rules that restrict our ability to fight the enemy. The reason is that we want to obtain political objectives, like show that the civilians were nice people or win their hearts and minds. And people say, well, these are military rules of engagement. No, they're not. They're imposed by the executive branch, the president. The military doesn't want to restrict themselves. It's like I go into battle and you're going to tie one hand behind my back and tell me go fight them. So it increases American casualties, and there's supercilious rules that, for example, in Afghanistan, unless their enemy shooting at you, you may not shoot back first, which is crazy. I always wanted to shoot first in combat. And then, that's the best time to shoot the enemy is when you identify them before they start shooting at you. Just makes common sense. So Waddell was, his dad's a Navy SEAL, called me the day before Christmas because our Warrior Defense Project, there's no time off for me. I'm like you, I'm always at it. And he said, can you help my son? His son's a lieutenant in the Marines. He was relief for cause, which means you'll never get promoted. Your career's destroyed. And I said, well, what did he do? He shot a tractor. And the backstory was that, his Marines were out in patrol and one of his soldiers stepped on a IED, improvised explosive device, blew off both legs. 2 days later, Waddell sees in that same area these insurgents digging a big hole in the ground to plant another bomb. But the rules of engagement say you cannot shoot them unless you're shooting at you. So he calls up headquarters, and after him and Han, they finally said, well, we do have positive ID on one guy that's digging that hole, so you can go ahead and shoot him, but you can only use a sniper rifle. So they shoot and wound him in the stomach, and then the bad guys put him on a tractor, start to drive away. Waddell orders his soldiers to shoot the tractor so we can go capture this guy. They shot the tractor. The bad guy, rolled out. So the bottom line is no civilians injured, the right bad guy killed, one tractor wounded. And for that, they relieved him for cause and tried to destroy his career. And thanks to you and our efforts, we were able to advance this to the public. And, the Pentagon was lit up with phone calls like, what the hell are you people doing? People didn't realize that. And he was reinstated, promoted, and now he's a lieutenant colonel and doing quite well. I talked to his dad the other day.
Yeah, that's such a great success story. But there are so many soldiers, so many troops who don't know to contact you, who don't have the ability to do that, and who've lost everything. And I think that's what is so heartbreaking to me. And I always wanted to ask you, and I'm glad, we're talking about this now. One of the biggest disappointments, I think, for me, especially covering the war in Afghanistan, was how our government just gave everything over to the Taliban, just abandoned every bit of resources that we had left. We abandoned them there. We armed the Taliban, made them the biggest terrorist fighting force in the world practically. And what we did ended up causing the death of 13 Marines during the evac, and all of those that were wounded. And then all of the Americans and people that were standing in line, our allies at Abbey Gate. I can't get over that 20 years culminated in that ending.
And not a single person in responsibility was relieved, fired, or resigned, either in the Obama administration, the civilian sector, State Department. Everybody pointed fingers at everybody else. Oh, I didn't do it. Not a single person took responsibility for what everybody agrees, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, was a complete malfeasance fiasco, what occurred there on every single level. And yet nobody took responsibility. All the generals, all the admirals, all the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all the Kirbys, nobody. They just lied to us and said, oh, it's perfect. It was the most wonderful military operation in history. Look how many planes we got in there. And what? It's just...
what blows my mind?
Gaslighting.
You know what blows my mind, Jeff? You know what blows my mind? Is that they would go after somebody like Waddell, right? They would go after him for shooting a tractor. And he was going to pay. His whole career was going to go down a toilet. His whole life was going to be flipped upside down until he found you. But these monsters here in Washington that really don't care about the men and women who have put everything out on the line, who have fought so valiantly for our nation so that we wouldn't have terrorists here in the United States fighting us on our homeland. None of them, like you said, none of them paid a price. And it's almost like I think America is kind of waking up to this. Sean always talks about it on the show. He talks about the two-tiered justice system, right? With the Justice Department. But I see it all the way through. And if there weren't heroes like you out there fighting for those that really don't have the resources to fight for themselves, God only knows what would have happened to them.
Well, I mean, there are people that that love this country, and I'm very humbled by your remarks. Obviously, I just saw the wood in front of me, doing my little part as much as I can. But it's just, this country is so great, has given me so much, and I just have such gratitude to have the privilege of even living here. Freedoms that we have, people have no idea relative. You know it. You've been all around the world. To the rest of humanity lives in the tyranny and the governments that they have to put up with, and the collapse of social order and civic justice. We have a lot of problems. We're still, the best in the world, but there's no doubt that we are degenerating on many levels, and that's sad to see. But we just saw the wood in front of us, do our duty as we can. And, in terms of journalism, I mean, there's very few journalists like yourself that put out the truth. I mean, you've been very fair. You put out when you write an article, you put out both sides. And we don't see that anymore in the mass media.
Thank you so much. But it's been a long road. It's been a difficult road, it's a lot of stories, right? A lot, you try to lay all the facts out so that the American people can make the best choice for them onto where to move forward. And I think but what we're seeing now, I don't think I've seen in my entire career. I'll be back in a second with Dr. Jeffrey Addicott, but first, let me tell you about Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold is a company that I believe in. Why? Because I believe you should diversify your money, folks. I really do believe that. We've seen what's happened with the banks. We see what is happening overseas. We see what happened in Canada, for crying out loud, with the truckers. Remember that? When they were seizing their bank accounts and anybody who donated to them. Don't let that happen to you. Right now, you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. This is really important. I want you to understand that it's not just me. I want you to do your own investigation. Just look at what Allegiance Gold has. Right now, Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry. Listen to this. 5 stars with TrustLink, AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and they have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. You can't get better than that. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, no H, SARA. Or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. That's 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, no H, or protectwithsara.com. And I wanted to ask you this because I know I won't have a ton of time with you. I want to ask you about the leaked Pentagon papers now, the ones that on the Ukraine war, basically suggesting that the White House has been lying to the American public. It appears that the White House assessment and the Pentagon assessment is that we're not going to, or that Ukraine may not win this war, that Russia may have the upper hand here, that what we've been told is a pile of, like Joe Biden likes to call it, malarkey, and that we're still trying to figure our way around this mess. And obviously, I think our adversaries, they understand what's going on here as well. It's not going to be easy to stop them like Russia or China. But what's your assessment of this?
Yeah, remember we started this conversation. If this administration tells you A, assume it's B, and you'll be closer to the truth. I've been to Ukraine 8 times, and from the very get-go, the Russians, everybody was saying, first of all, the Russians will knock it out in 2 weeks. I didn't think that was true because the Ukrainian people will fight. The Russians were surprised. They were stunned, and then they went to their long game. And their long game is we're taking the eastern provinces back, which are primarily Russian anyway. They don't ever tell you that. And no, you're not going to defeat the Russians. The Ukrainians are losing this war. They've been losing it from day one, and they refuse to negotiate a peace settlement, which to me is crazy because there's going to come a time within a year that you will not be in a position to negotiate anything. The Russians will be totally in the driver's seat. Primarily, the Ukrainians have no new people to put in the battlefield. They started the war with 260,000 soldiers. They've lost, close to 200,000 dead and wounded, and there's no replacements. You can give them all the beans and the bullets and pay for their pensions you want to, but without soldiers on the ground, you cannot win The Russians have an unlimited supply of reinforcements to just come in and come in and come in. And the Russians are destroying them with their artillery strategy. They do a counterattack, they fall back, let the Ukrainians come into the kill zone, and they kill them by the thousands, like sitting ducks.
Do you think that the United States is going to try to push for our allies like Poland or somebody else to start moving? I mean, do you think that there's any possibility at all that anybody else will become involved in this fight? Or do you think it's just gonna, or we're just gonna like wait it out and then just deal with whatever comes?
No, nobody else is sending ground forces in. Now, the papers did reveal we have, Green Beret special forces that are there. They're not on the front lines, folks. They're trainers. We do have some limited numbers of them in the country. They've always been there. And they train Ukrainians on certain weapon systems, but they're not fighting on the front lines. So there might be a few trainers here and there, but no country is going to send in men to fill the ranks. That's just not going to happen. And it's the same thing we see in history. It's a war of attrition. The Russians can keep losing longer than the Ukrainians can keep winning. And that's the Russian strategy, is just they're going to bleed them dry, and they're already doing it.
That's incredible. Okay, I've got two more big questions for you. One's going to be about your book, but I would be remiss if I did not bring up our good friend Gary Brugman. You fought for him. Gary will be listening to this, and he'll be like, "You didn't even talk about me, Carter." And I wouldn't blame him. But Gary Brugman got a pardon from President Trump I believe, for doing his job. He suffered as a former Border Patrol agent enormously. They went after him when he stopped a known drug dealer, basically just putting his knee down on his back. Nothing happened to the guy. I don't want to go through the whole story, but you fought for him to get this pardon. I mean, and I thought it was one of the greatest things that could ever happen to Gary, is to have that burden lifted off of his shoulders, because he's such a remarkable man and he's such a good human being.
Yes, he's a great Texan, and the long and the short of it is, long before he met me or you, he was, engaged in this incident at the border. They charged him with a human rights violation for pushing somebody on the ground when they refused to follow his commands, and
Right.
the government chose to prosecute him in Austin, in Texas, where you have juries that are more, inclined to convict someone for a human rights violation. He was convicted, wrongfully convicted, grossly punished. When he came to me, he had already served. This is
2 years. 2 years.
Yeah, he served 2 years. Yeah, and so we were able, through your help and others, to get the ear of President Trump, and he received his pardon. I can tell you that I'm in communication with Gary. He wants to be a police officer again in the state of Texas. I'm not licensed in Texas. I practice before military courts. So if there's any lawyers out there that are Texas attorneys, he needs your help to find someone that will do this pro bono, because he lost everything, to assist him in getting his record expunged with the pardon, so he can apply to be a Texas police officer. Please contact me if you are that person and are willing to help him out. I'd love to make that connection.
Oh, that's wonderful. I did not expect that at all. I will definitely get this little clip out there. So maybe we will find someone that can represent him. And last but not least, I think this is the most important. You do uncover some really uncomfortable truths in your new book. And I want to say it again. You guys have to get this book. It's called Union Terror: Debunking the False Justifications for Union Terror Against Southern Civilians in the American Civil War. And I think it's so important. First, give us a little taste of what you've uncovered and where the listeners can get your book.
Exactly. I was, for 20 years, my career in the military, I was a senior legal advisor for all the Army Green Berets. So this is part of what I kind of did for a living, is train soldiers and comply and abide by the law of war. And so history repeats itself. And so some of our lessons we need to be reminded so we don't repeat them. And one of the gross distortions of American history is the use of terror, raw terror, against innocent Southern civilians during the war. Now, my book is not a brief for the South or the Confederacy where I'm saying, lost cause, we should have won, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm very gratified that the war ended the way it did. I believe God controls history. However, a right thing has to be done in a right way. So what I uncover is what the Union military did under the direction of Abraham Lincoln to target innocent civilians by the thousands. They burned down their homes, they pillaged them, they killed all their animals, they stole all their food, left them out to starve in the dead of winter by the thousands. And then other unspeakable abuses were committed on the females by Union soldiers. And these facts are all uncovered in this book. And the lies that were used to justify it are also confronted in a very forceful manner. If you go to Amazon.com, Amazon Books, you'll see some reviews of the book. Interestingly, if you buy the book and do a review, Amazon will record that. If you don't buy the book and do a review, Amazon will also note that. All the negative reviews are from people that didn't even buy the book, which shows you, all the review, every single negative review, and there's only a few, you'll look up there and says, didn't buy the book. So how can you review a book you didn't buy? Well, they just see the cover and they see the title and they say, oh, this must be a racist or whatever, the usual nonsense. But I tried to be very neutral, just hear the facts, because the truth is often in the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say, and that's very true here. I mean, it was a disgrace to our military heritage, what the Union military did, and they didn't have to do it, is my point. The war would have been won without resorting to these types of criminal activities against innocent civilians, black and white, by the way. And the vast majority of Southerners did not own slaves. They made no discrimination when they came to your property, whether you're a black Southerner or a white Southerner, you were horribly abused.
That's interesting. Do you ever feel like telling the truth is a pretty scary thing to do nowadays? It's almost like you're up against, because the truth is to the victor, right? The victor comes up with the truth, right? Whatever they want that truth to be.
Well, plus today, people hate our culture. They hate the South. They hate George Washington. Anything that has to do with anything in our past, they hate it. And yes, the past has blemishes, but it's our past. It's our shared history, the good, bad, and the ugly. And if we forget it, we're going to repeat it.
You're absolutely right, Jeff. You're absolutely right. No doubt. Okay, I'm going to say it again. Get his new book, Debunking the False Justifications for Union Terror Against Southern Civilians in the American Civil War. That is Jeffrey Addicott, Dr. Jeffrey Addicott. He is my friend. You're a genius. And not only that, you're just a great American patriot who fights for those who don't have a voice. You give a voice to the voiceless, Jeff. That's all anybody could do in this world, is giving back to those who don't have a voice. So thank you so much for being a part of the show. And I'm going to bring you back as soon as I can. And next time you're going to be on video with me. That's what's going to happen. So there you have it. If you want the truth, you got to be able to handle the truth, I guess. That's Dr. Jeffrey Addicott. That's why I'm friends with him. It's not easy, but we won't repeat history if we actually face it. Face the truth. That's what we've got to do here in our country, folks. That's why each and every one of us are responsible for the future of this nation and for the protection of our children and our families. And that's why we've got to protect it. We are the last real bastion of liberty and freedom in the world. Don't you forget it. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless all of our troops and all of those who serve our nation anywhere you're at in the world. When you hear my voice, I'm sending a prayer to you. God bless our beautiful nation, and God bless the great state of Texas.